My client just told me that when she graduated from law school, she was top in her class. And when she went to tell her mother said, "Man, you are smart. Maybe you should have been a doctor." Right? Anyway, it's funny because I have found a lot of highly successful people have internalized the inner critic that may have been their mother or their father or a teacher or even a bully at school. That inner critic, that voice inside our head, we all have it. Does it help us out? It thinks it does, and some of us think it does, but most of the time, it sabotages us instead of helping us. The inner critic is there for a purpose, like it's thinking, that part of you is thinking it's going to protect you from making mistakes or embarrassing yourself or getting out there and, humiliating yourself in some way. But most of the time, it just puts the brakes on. It stifles you. It keeps you from actually being your best self. So what do we do about that inner critic? Well, what we do about that inner critic is you've got to adopt it. You got to own it. You got to make friends with it. You got to treat it like an employee. So first of all, most of the time we have a relationship with our inner critic, this adversarial. We're like, get away from me. I do not want you in my life. Or we may think of the inner critic like the teacher, the nun that used to slap us on the wrist. My inner critic, her name is Helga. And Helga, she has been very successful in her life as an Olympic gymnastics coach. And she looks it and she acts it. And she treats everything in life as if it's gymnastics. There are rules, there are levels of perfection, and everything should be scored based on those rules and levels of perfection. And the complete focus of life should be to achieve perfection in the context of those made up rules. My life, though, isn't a gymnastics competition. I've never actually even been in a gymnastic competition. I don't know what the heck Helga's doing inside my brain. But nonetheless, she's there. She wears her, sports outfit, and she is very professional, and she is very serious about what she does. She takes herself and her task very seriously. She is quite the get it done coach. And if you're not doing enough, she'll let you know. And that's the way she treats me. Hasn't been very effective in my life to have Helga as my inner critic, to be honest with you, because she doesn't really know what I'm up to. Not at all. In fact, Helga she just gets in my way. So I made friends with Helga a number of years ago and started to recognize her as something that is part of me, but not me, so also somewhat separate of me, so that I could distinguish her voice from a more authentic voice that is my voice. So I recommend that you do the same thing with your inner critic. See if you can't start recognizing your inner critic's voice and distinguish your inner critic's voice from the rest of the voices inside your head, from the authentic self that is you. Once you've identified your inner critic, and by the way, you can identify your inner critic pretty easily by just listening to these words, yeah, but. Anytime you try to say something nice to yourself, or you want to acknowledge yourself for a job well done, if you hear the words, yeah, but, that's your inner critic interfering. And you can then, whatever that criticism that follows that, that's your inner critic. Your inner critic is there for a purpose, as I said. They're there to protect you. But they do that from a perspective of a child, really, because your inner critic was born out of an event that had happened when you were a child. And so your inner critic basically worked really well for you as a child when that part of you was kind of born into the world. But usually their childlike perspective isn't that effective for your adult life and your adult world. So what do? Well, what I recommend that you do is you start treating your inner critic like an employee. Not the boss of you, but rather a low-level employee, an important one, but not one that gets to go to the board meetings. It's not a senior level employee, your inner critic. So I had a meeting with Helga, and I sat her down and said, Helga, thank you very much. I appreciate what you're trying to do. And there are times I need that, like hard line coaching. I need somebody to get me in line and keep me in line. But it's not most of the time. Most of the time, I actually need a cheerleader. I need somebody to build me up, somebody to nurture me. I need to have somebody that's going, you're doing a good job, keep doing it, right? That's not the kind of coach that Helga is. And so I let Helga know that, you know, it's not okay for her to be talking at me all the time. It's not okay for her to intervene with her criticisms on everything I do, and only those things I invite her to participate in. So now I have a relationship with her, so she knows her job. I know her job, and she stays in line because that's kind of who she is. She gets that. She gets a little irritated that I don't like to listen to her very often, and I don't give her as much responsibility as she thinks she could handle. However, it's working for both of us, really. We have a good relationship. So I recommend that you have a relationship with your inner critic, and you hire them on as a low-level employee. Give them a very specific, important job, and if you need to meet with them, regularly do that, but don't have it be too frequently, and don't allow them to interfere in your life randomly whenever they want. You get to set the boundaries around when your inner critic gets to share their insights with you. All right, that's all I have to say about inner critics today. Tune in another time and I will share with you how you can build up your inner cheerleader, your inner acknowledger, and that inner nurturer, which we all also need.